Namaste. Amen and blessed be. Before I dive into this sermon, I would pause for a moment. For anyone who's particularly bothered by the joyous noise of our children, it's a little quieter up here in this area. Throughout the month of November, we're focusing on the theme of covenant. This week, rather than talk about exactly the details of what a covenant is, I thought I'd talk about some of the symbols that we use to describe our covenant. In religious life, we rely really heavily on symbols and metaphor. That's kind of what the task of theology is all about. Patching together a collection of symbols until we begin to describe the mystery that we experience. Our opening hymn, Bring Many Names, is a really good window into the work of theology. That's actually why I chose it this morning, because we use metaphor and symbols in an attempt to describe the mysterious. Obviously, describing God is not an easy task. Describing the holy, healing power of human relationships takes just as much creativity. Unitarians and Universalists don't use a whole bunch of symbols, not nearly as many as some other religious traditions. Our sanctuaries tend to be pretty plain, but most of the symbols that we do have don't point to an individual deity or a very specific ideal. They point to the power of building a beloved community. Now, our most central symbol is, without a doubt, the flaming chalice. The version of the flaming chalice symbol that most of us are familiar with, the circle that our bronze chalice is based on, was created in 1961. That's the year that the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America merged into the Unitarian Universalist Association. As a part of that merger, these two liberal faith traditions brought together their two symbols into one. So the Universalists used as their symbol an off-centered cross in a circle. It represented their Christian roots, but they set the cross to the side, recognizing that there were many, many different sources of truth. And the circle represented the universal inclusion of all people as sacred, regardless of what faith they held. The Unitarians, on the other hand, utilized a flaming chalice as their primary symbol. I'll tell you a little more about that chalice in a minute. But for now, notice that it's this sort of skinny chalice right in the middle of things. So in 1961, when the two traditions merged, they created the off-centered flaming chalice with two circles. This is the symbol that our own chalice is crafted after. The two circles represent the interconnection of those two traditions of Unitarianism and Universalism. Some of you, actually today a lot of you, were around several years ago when Tapestry considered merging with a neighboring church, with Orange Coast UU Church. Now, do you remember how much work was involved in that? The conversations and meetings and budgets and votes and potlucks. If you weren't around, just ask anyone. It was a huge undertaking. I wasn't even here, and I heard about it. Now, imagine, if you will, the effort of merging two complete religious traditions with separate headquarters and governing structures and budgets and everything else. We kind of glaze over this piece of our history, but the intentional and grace-filled merging of those two separate traditions is what allowed Unitarian Universalism to thrive in the 21st century. And that covenanted relationship is symbolized here in the two interconnected circles surrounding our flaming chalice. We've memorialized the hard work of those people and incorporated it into our symbol. Now, the chalice itself has two different origin stories. The one that we tell most often is that the symbol came from the Unitarian Service Committee. During World War II, the Unitarian Service Committee was created to help refugees escape persecution in Europe. The new organization needed a symbol to identify itself as it worked in sort of underground ways in Nazi Germany. So in 1941, the Unitarian Service Committee commissioned an artist who created that new symbol for the organization. The simple drawing depicted a flame within a chalice to be used on documents and other materials. It's reminiscent of the flame of Greek and Roman temples, symbolizing sacrifice and helpfulness. And it's also somewhat similar to a Christian cross, recognizing the origins of the tradition. But I said there's another story. That's the one that we tell the most often because it's how the chalice came to American Unitarianism. But there's another story, one that is just as powerful and likely the one that inspired the 1941 creation of the chalice that we know. The other older story of the chalice comes from Jan Hus, a Czech priest and forerunner of the Reformation. In 1415, he was burned alive for several different heresies, but the most important one, he believed that lay people should be able to participate in the communion wine as well as the priests. Back in those days, the communion wine was available only to priests, while the laity got the bread. After Huss's martyrdom, that flaming chalice became a symbol of religious freedom throughout Europe. And without giving you a whole history of Unitarianism in Europe, let me just say that that time and that place was kind of the foundation for European Unitarianism. Unfortunately, when we hear stories of martyrs, we're often distracted by their death, and we forget what that brave person even stood for. So I want to remind us, Jan Hus offered a revolutionary message that laity should have access to the blood of Christ, the most holy element in the church. Against the grain of Catholic doctrine, he argued that this powerful and saving source of life shouldn't be reserved for an elite few, for the priests. It should be shared among the people. Now, still today in the Christian world, the elements of communion are grounds for very serious debate. In many churches still today, only ordained leaders can consecrate the elements. Only they can bless the bread and wine to make them sacred. And still in many traditions, the role is one women are fundamentally prohibited from holding. This chalice from Huss represents a foundational piece of Unitarian Universalist understanding. The shared chalice suggests that religious life is an exercise of community of equals. No one has more access to the divine than anyone else. No one's words are more holy. No one's thoughts are more valuable. Instead, we each bring what we can to this community so that we might grow and learn together. The chalice that we light every Sunday has quite a history. For some people, the flame represents the light of truth. For some, it's the warmth of community. But as we talk about covenant all this month, I want to remind you that the origins of this symbol are tied to personal sacrifice for larger community well-being. In both of these stories, in the case of the Unitarian Service Committee's action to rescue Jews from Nazi-occupied Europe, and Jan Hus speaking against religious hierarchy, brave men and women underwent great personal risk for those in need. Our chalice is a symbol of individual sacrifice and a religion shared equally among all those who would participate in it. Our chalice is illuminated every time we worship together, but it's accompanied by other flames here at Tapestry. Nearly every Sunday, several people light candles to represent the joys and sorrows in their hearts. I get a fairly good window into what many of you are lighting candles for. I can tell you that these flames are the embodiment of people's hopes and dreams, and also their deepest fears. They are budding romances and struggles with addiction, their self-discovery and lost jobs. They are children at their most difficult, and they are children at their most lovable, and they are parents and step-parents, best friends, neighbors, and myriad other souls that connect with our own. And like the flaming chalice, they tell us something very important about the nature of covenant. As these candles symbolize our deepest sorrows and celebrations, they tell us that we're invited to bring our whole self to Tapestry. Both your joy and your pain are valid. They're part of you, and you are welcome here as a complete person. In this beloved community, you're not expected to leave a piece of yourself at the door. But that also means that you have to welcome others in their full complexity. And that's hard work. It means that when you ask, "How are you today?" you might just get a real answer. And that you're expected to listen to that answer and to hold it for the precious gift that it is. We don't do it perfectly, but we aim to welcome everyone, regardless of where they are on their journey, with hearts full or hearts empty. And the candles up here, right in the middle, right up front, next to our chalice, symbolize that welcome. But our symbols aren't all up here. When Tapestry first moved into this space, I wasn't with you, but I've heard a lot about it. Let's say there was a lot of conversation about how it would be decorated. I'm actually a big fan of the simple but comfortable aesthetic that was created here. But they also wanted to bring some visual stimulation to the space, so Connie Purcell and Reverend Tom and a few other people selected some photographs for the wall over there. Some of you can see it. The rest of you will have to look after the service. There's a small sign next to those beautiful pictures, and because you've probably never read it yourself, I'm going to read it to you now. It says, "These photos, viewed as a group, represent various aspects of the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism, from honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all people to the responsible search for truth and justice. Photos of nature, animal life, and the cosmos depict our commitment to the interconnected web of all existence. The photos of other faiths, their modes of worship and holy sites, affirm that we draw wisdom from all world religions." They're more than pretty pictures. These wonderful photographs offer a visual summary of our beliefs. But to me, these pictures and the effort put into hanging them tell us something about the kind of community that we build here, the kind of covenant that we're shooting for. These pictures tell me that this community finds inspiration in hope, in beauty. That's not true everywhere. Here at Tapestry, both the natural world and the human achievement of artistic expression hold a place of honor and significance. Now, if all we were talking about was rules and values and right behavior, why not have some pictures of warning up there? Why not replace these images with reminders of environmental devastation or the horrors of war? Why not depict Jan Hus's martyrdom? Reminders of ethnic genocide. My point is, rather than offering warning and threat in this beloved community, we choose to focus on the positive and remind one another of the abundant hope in our world. We choose to state things in the affirmative. So the next time someone asks you about Tapestry or your own beliefs, I hope you keep this in mind, that we are more than an alternative. We are more than the negation of some other tradition. We're a justice-seeking faith community that changes lives. We find friendship, support, and education between these walls. It's a place where children are offered an ethical foundation. It's a place where music enriches our lives, where we strive to live our values. It's our religious home. Before I wrap up this sermon, I want to clarify the sort of lingering question of why are we talking about covenant all month long? It's not because I want you to understand our history or our governing polity. I promise. Those are great benefits. But we're focusing on covenant because what we're attempting to build at Tapestry is pretty radical. It's a radical way of being in the world. Placing mutual respect, honesty, and forgiveness as our highest priorities makes Tapestry different from the wider community. We're going against the grain, offering a different vision. In a world where the Koch brothers can buy Supreme Court justices, we clearly state that money cannot buy the truth. When our federal budget spends 10 times as much on military as it does on education, we clearly state that might does not make right. Tapestry stands as an alternative that questions the certainty that Father knows best. Sure, he knows a lot, and he has some very good advice. But no one always knows best. That's why we come here to learn from one another. Covenantal community, the way we strive to be together, isn't just another way of organizing ourselves. It's radically different in a world bound to profit and exploitation and oppression. Of course, we don't get it perfectly. Who gets anything perfectly? Getting this covenant thing right is hard. Efficiency and the bottom line are incredibly seductive. Now, month after month, your board of trustees has to make seriously hard decisions about setting policy, not just to build an institution, but to embody our values. Tapestry's board of trustees and I do our best. We're not perfect, but we do our best to remember that more than anything else, we're a community of people bound together by covenant. Now, we don't make anything. We don't sell anything. Our only product is our process, the way we are with one another. What we have to offer the world is how we treat one another. Our purpose for being is to demonstrate a community of respect, mutuality, hope, honesty, and forgiveness. Our purpose for being is to demonstrate to ourselves and to the wider world around us that in spite of all the cynicism, we can thrive in mutually supportive community. It's not so that we can be cloistered and protected. We offer a different vision to gain some hope, to gain some courage, so that we can go out to the world and do our part to rebuild democracy. We create beloved community so that we can go into the office on Monday morning and insist that human beings are more important than the bottom line. We create beloved community as a foundation to raise our children in a home where authority is married to compassion. This beloved community business is not easy, and it's not something that one or two of us can do alone. It's something that we've all signed on to. Fortunately, we're surrounded by some inspiring symbols, both from our Unitarian Universalist tradition and from our own unique community. So I hope this month that those symbols, our chalice, our candles, our art, and also our tapestry, remind us of our goal and inspire us to the challenging and radical work of building beloved community. Amen. For several weeks, I've shared with you offertory words from the Reverend John Wolfe. He talks about the reason for joining a Unitarian church is to support it. He says that you want to support a UU church because it can laugh, because it stands for something in a day when religion is still more concerned with platitudes than with prejudice and war. You want to support it not because it buys you some insurance policy toward a funeral service, but because it insults neither your intelligence nor your conscience, and because it calls you to worship what is truly worthy of your sacrifice. There's only one reason for joining a Unitarian Universalist church, and that is to support it.